No, they can have it. No, I don't need one.
Okay.
Unless you want me to have one. I'll look at it.
If Sonia does come.
Somebody more important than me may need one of those.
All right, it is
Eric.
1:30 p.m. We are back from recess to take up the item discussions with Erica Aguirre from
Yes.
Texas County District Retirement System. Ms. Aguirre, welcome and come on up.
Thank you, Judge, and thank you, Commissioners, for your invitation to come to Wichita today. Thank you, Nancy, for coordinating my visit. I certainly appreciate it. Today's just an easy day. It's more of a conversation if you'd like. I make it a point to visit my courts every 3 years or so to give you an update on TCDRS, your retirement. And I've been proud to serve this area going on 11 years this September. So my region.
I was fixing to ask how long. I knew you had worked to fall there. So.
Yes, sir. I've been with TCDRS 11 years. September 10th will be my anniversary. And I serve north of Waco to Oklahoma, east of Lubbock to the Piney Woods, and Laredo to Brownsville. So I get a nice,
Weird area.
very spread out, but I'm very...
States anyway.
Actually, Texas is so big. Yes, sir. That's true. But I'm very fortunate because I have the opportunity to work with the members that make this system great. And we were designed by the legislature in 1968. They created us because they felt that counties and districts needed a retirement of their own. We were modeled after TMRS, the municipal retirement system. But I will say that in today's presentation, I've provided you a brief a set of slides that I'll review. And I think the main message that I would ask you take away is how different we are as a pension. Most of my time that I spend traveling is to talk about how we're unlike Texas pensions and national pensions because of our design. We do not receive state funds. We fund ourselves. And therefore, we have to be very specific on the structure to ensure that that funding will be there when each of your members are ready to retire. And so today, I'd like to open up just by giving you some statistics because my decision makers, such as yourselves, often want to know about the system as a whole. And we are proud that we now have reached 850 employers, and that means every county in Texas except one.
Which one?
Motley.
Motley.
It's not that they don't want to join, they just haven't been able to afford to. And Ford County joined us 6 years ago. Ford County came across some wind farms, was able to join. So maybe Motley will follow suit.
The wind farms have been a windfall.
And so I'm hoping that before I retire one day, Motley joins, because then we'll have all 254 counties. Now we have districts, and they are appraisal, irrigation, navigation, hospital districts, emergency services. If they are a governmental entity that is not a school system with the state or municipality, they can join us.
Doesn't have to be a taxing entity.
No, as they just have to be a governmental entity, and they do have to go through an application process because our legal has to determine that they can join. We've also often had private entities try to apply and they cannot. So, they do apply, but we have about 555 districts and growing. We don't advertise, we grow by word of mouth, but we average about 20 to 25 new districts a year. And we are now at 850.
Does that include COGS?
Yes, sir. Oh, yes. I have COGS here in the area. Yes, sir. And throughout Texas. Absolutely. Now, as a system, take all of our assets from all the counties and districts. We're 89% funded as a system. And why that's important is because oftentimes I'm pulled aside and I'm asked, are we okay? Is TCDRS okay? And that question stems from when people turn on the news and they watch other pension systems that are 50% funded or 49, or they're struggling, and we as a system are 89% funded and very proud of that. We have a 9% 40-year return. I'm going to show you some slides on that. Our long-term goal is 7.5 on an annual basis. We know we won't hit 7.5 annually. We're either going to exceed that, fall within that realm, or be just below. So I'm going to show you a threshold that our portfolio is designed to withstand.
But now, Erica, the only benefit to us as members on a 9% return that the holding makes is to buy down our liability, is it not?
Sure. When we do well, when we exceed our 7.5 and we have gains, we pass it off to the employers, and it pays down that liability. Yes, sir. And so 2 years ago, we closed the year at 22%. Last year, we closed it at negative 5.8. So there is that variance of how we perform. Whenever we have our positive years, anything above 7.5, we pass that off to the employers, all 850 of them as gains. And I'll show you a slide on that as well.
Now, where is the 7.5 come into play? Because we're receiving 7% as members. What's the 0.5?
So the 7.5 is a investment return goal. That's what the portfolio is trying to aim for. And we have a very diverse portfolio across and within asset classes, from private equities to things I'm going to show you today. And so when you take our entire portfolio, our investment managers, both internal and external, they're trying to hit 7.5 on an annual basis. And it used to be 8, but 3 years ago we adjusted that investment assumption. It hadn't been adjusted in 40 years, and it was time. So we went from an 8% goal to a 7.5, but we know that we're gonna, in some years, exceed that by double, if not triple, like we did 2 years ago. The way the portfolio is performed is to be within a risk tolerance, and it's our awareness that in some years it's gonna really exceed it. Some years you're gonna see us hit our mark, and then some, like last year, it'll be a little bit below. And our assets as a system, if you were to poll everybody's trust, because Wichita County has its own trust, and Dallas County has its own trust, and Harris, everybody has their own trust. If we were to pool of our system, our assets are at $42 billion as a system. And I'd like to point out on page 2, I did mention we were
Each
creating.
county has, or each member has their own trust, and our money stays within that trust, but used globally for the.
It's only pulled for investment purposes, yes. But every county and district has its own trust. So for example, Commissioner, Wichita County would never be responsible to fund any other county or district in our system. And you as decision makers set your own benefit levels that you can afford, because you are only responsible to manage your plan.
Our portion of the portfolio.
Absolutely. And each district manages their own portion of their plan. And the only time money is pulled is for investment purposes, which is why we have $42 billion. Our investment managers take that, and they're able to hire the best management for the best price because of the size of our portfolio.
And that is inclusive of both the members' money and the
Yes,
county's money?
system-wide. Mhm.
System money.
Yes, and members are saving for their own portion. And while they're doing that, employers are saving for the match that you're promising them. So it's happening simultaneously across their career. So when a member is ready to retire, all those years, our system has known what their salary is, how much they've contributed, what the match is that you've promised, and they've been studied. It's actually called a valuation. And we value your plan every year from January 1 to March 31. Our actuaries, Milliman is who we hire. They value and study everything. Who did Wichita County hire? Who's eligible to retire? How many are vested? How many male versus female? Because of life expectancies, females are more expensive to fund. So we have to look at what are their salaries. Did you give people raises? Did you have people leave and take out their money? Because if they took out their money, the match stays with Wichita County. We study, we have counties that will shut down a whole division. They'll shut down a jail, so they lose a big chunk of employees. And so we study everything. And by March 31st, we know what happened in Wichita County as of the last year. And then they take that knowledge, that valuation, and they determine how we did in the market, because by then our investment managers have our results. And how we did and what your valuation, you put that together, and that's how we come up with what you owe us. And we do it every year.
Operating costs of 0.21%, does that include hiring the money managers as well?
Yes, it's after
Okay.
paying our management. Yes, sir. In fact, I just clarified that with our executive director because I was asked that by another court. And after net of all fees, so once we pay our management fees, once we pay the building that we own and our salaries, and net of all fees, our operating costs are 0.21% of assets. If you compare us to a 401k, their operating costs average 1 to 2% of assets, and we're 0.21, so much lower. And on the bottom of page 2, I would say that I spend most of my time talking about these 3 characteristics, because the question that I'm often posed is, how are we different? Well, we're savings-based, as I explained. While the member's saving for themselves, the match is being saved over the course of the career. And then the responsible funding is what I just described to you. We study your plan and then we tell you that's what's owed and that's what you pay. And the last thing is why I speak to you all as the decision makers. This body can determine benefit levels. So if you needed to lower benefits, you could do that, and January 1 of next year, you'd experience a cost savings. If you wanted to increase benefits, you had that right. So the decision makers, and I'm going to show you what you can change, can increase or decrease in a given year. You know, I have a district outside of Lubbock, Garza County Hospital District. They have 1 employee. And Harris County has 18,000 employees. How could we ever umbrella this plan where you have sizes that don't even compare? So every county, as we mentioned moments ago, is responsible for their size and their budget, and no one else's. And these 3 characteristics are why we're so unique. Here at Wichita County, your members save 7%, and they've done that since you joined us in January of 1968. You've never changed it. But if this court wanted to change it, you could go down to 6, 5, or 4. And why would you do that? If ever you needed to experience a cost savings and you needed your cost to go down, the less they save, the less you have to match. So if you wanted them to save 6, 5, or 4, your cost as a county would go down, but they inevitably would save a little less for retirement. But you've kept it at 7 since you joined us in 1968, January. But you can change that in any given year if you so wanted to. Your match is 200%. That's 2 to 1, so $2 to every one of their dollars. And it's very important to note that a member never sees that money unless they retire for life. We get calls all the time from members saying, well, I just logged into my personal account and I don't see the match. It's not yours. It belongs to Wichita County. You'll get it when you retire. So a member must reach eligibility, they must choose a lifetime payout, and then they get the match from Wichita. So oftentimes when your employees leave employment and they separate, they pull out their own money, guess what they forfeited? The match, because it's your money. It stays with Wichita County Trust. And your match is 2 to 1. That is system-wide average. Most counties and districts offer a 2 to 1. It keeps them competitive, and it's a retention tool. On page 4, I thought you would find it interesting. We pulled some averages. Your average employee here at Wichita County is 42, with about 9 years of service, and your average retiree is very young at 61. That's about the average that here when they reach eligibility, they choose to retire, and they live about an average of 18 years. Again, we're just taking conglomerate averages from when I pulled your numbers. And the average benefit annually for Wichita County is $23,300 a year. When you look at the GDP and how TC-DRS affects Texas, you'll notice at the bottom, just benefits in Wichita County, that includes all the districts, the appraisal district, yourselves, this county, we paid $8 million or over $8 million just in Wichita. And I find that to be helpful because every 4 years we conduct an economic impact study, and 96% of retirees stay in their home here in Texas in their local neighborhoods. So when we're paying out over $8 million, where is it being spent? Here. It's right here in your own neighborhoods, and that's very important. On page 5 at the top, there's a snapshot of your plan of benefits. As I mentioned, your members save 7%, and they have a 200% match. If this court ever chose to adjust the 200%, you can do that in any given year. If you needed to lower your costs, you lower the match. That's another option. And you can do it in increments of 5%. So you could go down to a 195 match, a 180, 85, if it would lower your costs, anything would. Or if you wanted to increase the match for your members, you could go 205, 210, 215, and the highest is 250. $2.50 for every one of their dollars. By state statute, that's as high as you can go. And the lowest you can go is 100, so 1 to 1. Many of our districts that join early on, they stay at 100 until they get comfortable, maybe about 5 years in, and they start increasing the match.
And walk me through so after the 2, it's what?
It can go as high as 250 in increments of 5%. Now, you don't have to climb a ladder. Commissioner, if you wanted to go from 200 to 250 the next year, you just had to tell me and I can show you that cost.
But my first option past 2 is what?
Is 205. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
I didn't realize that it was in 5%.
You know, I bring that up because I'm finding that some of my decision makers aren't aware. They think that it's in these big chunks.
That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. That's actually common. So no, it's in increments of 5%. In fact, I have quite a few districts that are at a 185, and they've stayed there for some time. Mm-hmm. And then I mentioned it's not their money until they're eligible. Well, they have to hit one of 3 rules. They don't need the trifecta, just one. And if they're age 60 and they have 8 years of service, they can click their heels and retire because they're eligible. And then they would get the match, and we would calculate a lifetime benefit. Or if they hit the rule of 75, all that means is we add their age plus years of service. And if that equals 75, congratulations to them. And finally, the last rule, is the 20 years. So if you hire someone at the ripe old age of 20, they can be eligible to retire at 40. But I will say that there are two conversations to be had: eligibility and affordability. A 40-year-old might not want to retire because that benefit might not be very big a month, so that the longer you stay, that really helps you out.
You can carry your service credits from other like agencies, TMRS.
Yes, sir.
And
In fact, we've named that. It's called a proportionate service system. We recognize ERS, JRS, TRS, and TMRS, and they recognize us. The only thing we ask members is they please tell us, because we don't do umbrella searches and we don't know if they came, but if they make a phone call or push a button on our website, we'll verify that time, and it counts. We often get asked if they can roll money in, and that is a no-no. Because, as I explained, we study your plan. Imagine if we let members roll money in that this court didn't budget for, and now you're having to match dollars that you didn't budget for. It wouldn't work well in the system, so we don't let them roll money over. But the time is counted. Yes, it is. And at the bottom, I've included a graphic at the bottom of page 5 of a dollar bill, and the reason I did that is because since we're not funded by the state of Texas, people often say, well, how are we funded? In 3 ways. Our portfolio, it's the largest driver, so we manage it very, very diligently. And if we were to pay a benefit dollar to a retiree, 74 cents would come from our investment returns. 15 cents of that benefit dollar would come from the counties and districts that fund the match, and 11 cents would come from employees' own deposits of that 7% into their own account. So by 3 of us, the investment returns, the employers, and the members, that's how we fund TCDRS.
Now, Erica, let me ask you, so why isn't there even though you can't roll money in, why isn't there a leveling factor? For example, let's say that Nancy works at the jail and receives a lot of overtime, and that pushes her salary to $150,000 per year with overtime. The amount that person, Nancy, is able to pay into retirement is considerably more than I would be able to pay into retirement. So why doesn't the system have a leveling that says, okay, your top earner is this, you as an employee each year can invest up to that amount?
Well, I'm glad you asked it and framed it that way, because in that example, let's say, for example, Nancy gets a huge raise and her salary jumps. She's paying 7% of her income. So for that new income, guess what we get in her account? 7% of that. So for that year, she is contributing a much larger amount, 7%, than, let's say, her colleagues, because maybe they didn't get that raise. And you use leveling factor, and I appreciate the language, because TCDRS is a cash balance system. We don't have a multiplier. We don't have highest paid salary. We don't have a ceiling. We're cash balance. So whatever you earn in your career, all we know is we're getting 7% of that. And in some years, you're going to make as you increase or grow in your career, you're likely going to get raises. So your 7% has gone higher and higher. So the level playing field is that whatever you earn, you're getting 7% taken from your check and put into your own account. And we value your plan every year, so we'll know that at Wichita County, you might have had a few employees that, boy, did they get raises, because look at what they put into their plan. That 7% jump maybe times 3. So then what happens is more money goes into the trust for that year, and when we value your plan, we know how much this county has to save to match because she just put more money into the system. What's really helpful is that we don't value your plan every 4 years or even every 2. We do it every year for your exact example, because a person can go from a $35,000 a year salary to a $85,000. And so what matters is, as long as Nancy's an employee, her payroll department sending us that payroll, and she's getting 7% of her income. And when we value it, we step back and we go, whoa, wow, Wichita County had some raises. And in fact, Commissioner, I'm glad you brought this up, because your costs went down because we studied you and you had raises. You gave a lot of people raises this year. And I think because of inflation, across the state, raises were given, and so your costs went down. Even though we had a negative year, negative 5.8, your costs went down. Why? Because you put more money into the trust. And so there is a leveling factor per se in that we don't have tiers or highest paid salary. In fact, TRS does and ERS, other systems. We don't. It's a cash balance system. Whatever you put in, whatever your 7% is over your career, at the end we look at that match, and Wichita County is giving them 2-to-1. And it's very simple, which we appreciate, because members, whatever you work, you can never reach a ceiling. In fact, for people who have long careers and made that income go up, they make more money in retirement than they did as an employee, because time was on their side. And member accounts are earning 7% compound interest. So after about 15 years, your account's a certain size, and then you're usually getting raises because you're older in your career. Your interest is working for you harder than your own deposits. So, people will run an estimate and they're ready to retire and they're eligible, but then they run it for 3 more years and they stay because it's so much bigger because of that interest. So thank you for asking it that way. On page 6, the investment return assumption, while I'm not an investment manager, I'm here to say that we have a very diverse target asset allocation across and within asset classes. And we have designed about 7 years ago, the professionals, the experts, designed on our website what you see here on page 6. And if you're curious, you can click on any target asset allocation and it will give you the history, who the managers are, what their year-to-date performance is, who managed it prior. It's public information. So if you ever wanted information about our assets, please visit our website and click on any of this allocation. And our returns specifically, I put them in blue. You'll notice in the middle of the bottom of page 6. We always compare ourselves to benchmarks, to plans that are of similar size, and you'll notice how we outpace our benchmarks across all years for the last 40. To include last year, while we were not happy with the negative return, we still outpaced our benchmark. That was negative 8.8. On page 7 is that threshold I promised you. You're going to see a gray bandwidth at the top on slide 13. That bandwidth is there on purpose. We know we're not always going to hit our 7.5 investment return assumption goal. We know that. But we will stay within a bandwidth, and the portfolio has performed as expected, except the recession of 08, the recovery of 09, and last year at negative 5.8. Other than that, prior to that, the 22%, it did exceed it as a greater than the threshold. But it is performed as it's intended to. And your costs for next year, as I mentioned, have decreased a little bit to 12.11. Currently, for 2023, you're paying us 12.42, and it decreased to 12.11. So it wasn't a considerable drop, but it did go down. And when I asked why, and I went to the actuaries, they said because they had payroll increase, and so your costs went down a little bit. You just put more money into the trust in that given year. On page 8, you'll see, there it is, 12.42 is what you're paying in 2023, and you'll pay that until December of this year. And beginning January of next year, it goes down to 12.11. But I'd like to offer a strategy if you're interested. This court, years ago in 2010, this court elected to set in place what is called an elected rate. Instead of paying what was due, the court said, we're going to pay you a little bit more, and we're going to begin to create a little bit of a cushion for anything, adverse years or maybe a match increase. And they did that for 3 years, and that elected rate held for 3 years. Well, in 2013, their required rate exceeded that elected rate just a little bit. And by our state statute, you must pay what's required. Well, the court did not adjust that elected rate. No problem, they didn't have to. It just kind of stayed quiet because the elected rate since 2013 has been just above that. The required has been just above the elected. So now for the first time, your rate went down again. If this court chooses to stay at the 12.42, which is above the 12.11, you can do that. And that would be called a new elected rate. You're electing to pay us more than what's due. The example I use is Tarrant County. Tarrant County did that. It was a very tiny little elected rate difference. And then their rate dropped and they held this one. Their rate dropped again and they kept holding it. And now they have a pretty considerable cushion there. And what they've used the cushion for, gentlemen, is to pass COLAs. They pass COLAs to retirees, and the cushion that they've separated what's owed and what's due, that fund the money is in their trust and it doesn't cost them because they've paid it over time as an elected rate. And every time their rate dropped, they just kept holding it. Now, what their court can do is lower that elected rate anytime they chose to, because by state statute, all you owe is what's required. And so when I saw that, when I was researching your plan a few weeks ago upon Nancy's call, I thought, well, their rate decreased. Maybe this court might want to stay there at 12.42 and begin again an elected rate. You don't have to. You only owe what's required. But if you did, it could set into place a new cushion, and you could leave it there or adjust it in any given year. That is your prerogative. I just thought I'd mention that because it was done in the past here. The last part of my presentation is really just some fun administrative stuff. We have gone paperless. I don't know if you've heard, but you probably were asked to create an online account for yourselves. We have been able to create some very happy members. We used to take 5 weeks to turn around a withdrawal. If they no longer worked for you and they wanted their money, we can do it in 24 hours now. They can get their money the next day in their bank account if they withdraw. And that's because we went online. And so we have a two-factor authentication, and it is a strict authentication. We have to verify who you are. But once you create your online account, you can update a beneficiary. You can withdraw your money if you're no longer working. You can retire online, change your email, the spelling of your name, your address. You have control of that account, and it's been very, very advantageous. And so the last few pages are just encouraging your members. I've been working closely with the administrative side just to get your members to all claim their account and access their information. We have had some people say, oh no, thank you, I don't like to work online. But our message is, even if they don't want to use it, if they'll please create the account, because it protects them against online fraud. If you have given your account a username and password, you make it very hard for someone to impersonate you to get in. But if you've never claimed your account, we are in the public, and people can come across your social, and people can try to impersonate you and create your account. So to avoid that, we've asked people, just create an account even if you don't want to use it. But I do find that they use it because they can run estimates and they get to see what they make in the future, and that's a lot of fun. Especially on a long week, that's a lot of fun. On page 11, before I close, I was asked to mention COLAs, and I spoke about it briefly with Tarrant County. When it comes to TCDRS, if this court ever chose to pass a cost of living adjustment that we like to term COLA, it's only for retirees. We are not talking about your employees. We have nothing to do with their raises. It's only for retirees. And right now, to date, this county has 385 retirees. And you have 472 depositing members. And sometimes people are shocked by how little retirees they have. You've been with us since 1968. Some courts look at me and say, gosh, I thought we would have more. Well, 1 in 4 retire. Either you have someone who doesn't reach becoming vested, you have someone who doesn't stay to become eligible, and you have someone else who leaves and takes out their money. So not everybody retires. And 1 in 4 when we study the aggregate. And so out of you've been with us since 1968, and you have 385 who very happily collect a lifetime check, and they get that on the last business day of every month via direct deposit.
Help me with the 472 number.
Yes, so 472 are active depositing members. That's who participates in our system. So 472 employees of Wichita County.
Can we have an employee that's not a participating member?
Yes, sir. If they're temporary or seasonal, they do not participate. Absolutely. In fact, many counties have temporary and seasonal. I'm sure you all do as well. They don't participate. You have to be a permanent employee.
So we have 472 full-time employees in Wichita County, no more than 472.
Well, it's kind of a rolling, that's what she.
Yeah, that's what I printed. If you hired someone recently.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the last time she pulled it, but
Yeah.
that's gonna roll with her revolving door in the
But
jail.
I was under the impression that was like a 500 to 550 number, but that's not true.
If we're 20 down in the jail, that makes,
Yeah, that's our full time, that's about right, you
I've
know.
always said 500.
Yeah, it's
Give it
pretty
back.
close, I mean, that revolving door, it's really,
It's such a revolving door. It's even hard for me to say because it's a snapshot that we take it at, and then you hire, and that changes in 2 months, and
Gotcha.
so.
I mean, we get, terminations and hires every day.
We don't figure the lifetime benefit payout.
Yes, that's a great question. So we take the factors are the following. Since we're a cash balance system, the day your member comes to you or us and says, I'm ready to retire, how much do they have in their account? To include their interest earned, all that 7% over their career, and they have one bucket of money. Then at that time only, the 200% match is given to them, so 2 to 1. So now they have a total bucket of money, if you will. Then our actuaries look at their life expectancy. And it's rather complicated because they do it off these formulas, and they have a life expectancy charts they use, and they determine how long they think that person will live. And then the last factor, Judge, is there are 7 options that a member will choose. 3 pay higher because they're not meant to leave a beneficiary money. 4 are meant to leave a beneficiary for life, so that's a dual life. So based on the option, they're going to get a different amount. So total cash, lifetime expectancy, and the 7 options, and that's how we come up with their monthly
Do
amount.
any of those options include the option for the retiree to essentially build in their own COLA? And by that I mean, I'll take a smaller amount here at the beginning, and it will build over time to keep track with CPI, or as I get older and I know I need more, or I think I'm gonna retire and be able to work a second job right now. Are any of those options present in any of those 7?
Legislatively, no. That would be a legislative change to our system. The only thing a retiree can do, they must take it all when they retire. They must take it all. We are not allowed by legislation to hold on to it, and we are not allowed to tier out the money for them to take more later. So to answer your question, unfortunately, no. The only way a retiree would ever see a COLA is if this court chooses to give them one, because we are required to pay them out 100% of their money upon retirement. Now, I will say that you do bring an interesting point to the table. On your history page, there's and I apologize for the small font, they're going to be making it bigger for me. There's a line item on the history page that says partial lump sum payment, no. Partial lump sum payment is a decision this court can make where the day a retiree or a member is ready to retire, they can take a lump sum out. This is the only thing, Judge, aside from taking it all at once. They can take a lump sum, whether it's for a surgery, a new roof, go to Hawaii, doesn't matter. They can take out a lump sum and they retire off the difference. This court has never allowed that, ever. If this court were to allow that, then it would say partial lump sum, yes, and it's non-rescindable. It's there forever and ever and ever. Bexar County offers it. A few counties offer it. And it's just, there's no right or wrong. It's a philosophy. I have courts that tell me, Erica, we haven't let them touch the money their whole career. We're not going to let them touch it now. We want them to get the most. And then I have courts that say, we don't care. It's their money if they want to touch it. But I do have courts that shy away from it because they say, well, if you let them take out $50,000 and they retire off the difference, they're going to want a COLA because they can't live off of it and we can't afford them. So it's up to you, but this county does not have it. If you chose to, let me know and I can add it to your plan and show you the cost for that. It's a very inexpensive cost, but there is a small cost to it.
But we have never as a county paid a COLA either, have we?
Never. And in fact, that's why I printed the history, sir. If you'll see where it says COLA right in the middle of the page, it's blank. There's never been a cost of living passed for this county, no. Mm-mm. Never. And Dallas County doesn't pass them. They don't. Some counties never pass them. It's up to you. They're never required. It's just to answer your question, Judge, it's the only way they would see a COLA because they don't have the way to do it on their own. Legislatively, if that were to ever happen, it would be a legislative alteration of the plan. Mm-hmm.
Now, Erica, so that I'm clear on the 2, I'm putting in $1,
Mm-hmm.
and that $1 is guaranteed to earn me 7%.
Yes, sir.
Then the county sees my $1 and puts in 2. And that 2 also, each $1 earns 7%.
Actually, no. Let me back you up. So you have $1 and you earn 7%. The county just matches the $1 and 7%. The only way those $2 are ever earning interest, if you will, is when TCDRS does well with our portfolio, like we did on a 22-year return, and we pass off gains to the employer. That's when you all will see interest earned on your money. But for a member, they only get the 7%, and at the end of their career, it's just matched 2 to 1, which is whatever they have. That $2 is not earning a 7% interest.
You don't get the match till you retire.
You don't get
I know, but what I'm saying, I don't get the match plus interest. I only get the match. So I get $3 plus the 7% on my $1. Correct?
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. You're getting your $1 and you're getting the $2 from them, so that's $3, and then plus the 7% on your $1. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. And people often ask me, well, how do the counties make interest? Well, when we do well in the market, we pass off those gains, and your assets are what are going to earn over time. And then on years we don't do well. Last year we had a negative 5.8. We didn't have gains to pass off. So some years we have gains to pass the employers and some years we don't. But the member, by state statute, makes 7% annually. And we had many members call the year we made 22 and said, why didn't I get more? Because on years we make 22, you get 7. And on years we don't, you still get your 7. But you're not going to get any more than the 7 as per state statute. But to your question, if that's right. It's only it's 1 plus their $2 from you and the 7% on their $1. Mhm. And if you ever chose to pass a COLA for retirees, on page 11, I wanted you to know that we offer 2 types, flat rate and CPI. That's all we offer. A flat rate means every one of your 385 retirees gets the exact same bump. They all get a 1% bump or a 2% bump. Right now, the highest flat rate you can offer is 6%. That is set by our Board of Trustees based on inflation. And so you can offer a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6% flat rate COLA. Just to give you a quick example, if I make $1,000 a month and you give me a 1%, that's $10. So now my check is $1,010. COLAs are never automatic. If you only passed one and never passed one again, well, then you never passed one again. They have to be elected by this court, and they have to be voted on and approved on an annual basis if ever you chose to offer them. But the raise, that 1,010, now that it's 1,010, that raise is permanent. But they may never ever see another raise again if you don't authorize another COLA. And the other type is called a CPI. Those are a little different. They stand for Consumer Price Index, and they restore lost purchasing power. So if you were to pass a CPI COLA now, this court would observe that it'd be very expensive because you've never passed one. So you're restoring lost purchasing power for these retirees who have had lost purchasing power, and that might be a little bit pricey. But you can restore 10% all the way to 100% of lost purchasing power. So you have 10 options of a CPI, 10, 20, 30, all the way to 100. And you have 6 options of a flat rate, 1 to 6%. If you're just curious, I am more than happy to run you numbers, and I can provide them to Nancy, who can send them to you in a PDF form. I can run you, 10 CPI. There's 16 types of COLAs. I can run you all 16 if you're curious on what they cost. But again, they're never automatic. They must be elected. And I always will tell you the dollar cost, because you can either pay for them up front or you can amortize and roll them into your rate. What that would mean is instead of 12.11, your rate would go up because you'd be financing a COLA for a period of time. But I can always give you those costs if you're curious. And the very last of what I wanted to talk about is rehiring former employees. Boy, do I get asked about this a lot. Can they quit and can they come back? The answer is yes, as long as it's not arranged. It must be bona fide. So if John Smith, he's tired, he has his celebration, you buy him a cake and he retires, and he has a nice couple months and he realizes retirement isn't so green on the other side, he misses Wichita County and he wants to come back, he can absolutely come and apply again, and you offer him a job if you'd like, as long as 1 full calendar month has passed. So if he retires in January, don't even have conversations with him in February. He can come to you in March to ask for his job back if he missed you. He just must be bona fide. That arrangement of, why don't you retire and we'll bring you back? No, that's against the rules. Do not.
Can't be pre-planned.
No,
But-
sir.
But does he continue after he comes back, a month has passed, he comes back, goes back to work in a department, what happens to his benefit?
He keeps getting it. It's never interrupted. So he has an uninterrupted retirement for life, and he starts a new salary. And he's already eligible, sir, because he never lost his time. Remember, we share time and you never lose it. So maybe he puts in 3 years and he says, okay, now I'm really ready. Now I'm really tired. Well, he's eligible. So he retires a second time. Obviously a much smaller benefit because he only worked 3 years. But it's still his money. So now he has 2 retirements. And I get asked this all the time. Will you combine it? No, he gets 2 checks. He gets 1 check, and then he gets another check, both direct deposited the same day. We don't combine it because they're treated as 2 separate experiences. But he keeps, it's uninterrupted. And I will close with this. 2 checks aren't always better than 1. If you have a member who's really not sure about leaving, look at them and say, don't leave. Because you're making 7% on a big number versus 7% on 0. Because he comes back and 7% on nothing. So even if he puts in 5 years, his check's tiny. So 1 big check is often better than a good one and a little one. So if they're not ready to leave, they're not ready to leave. Coming back for a second check it's not always what it's cracked up to be. But that's their prerogative as long as they wait that calendar month and you don't make any arrangements with them. I get that asked a lot.
You give your wife the big one and you get.
I like how you think, Commissioner. I like that. This is my favorite presentation. Yes, I like that.
Erica, do you have any cost projections on any of those increases?
You know, off the top of my head, I didn't. I wish I had run you some, but I can get them for you by tomorrow. And I can run you all 16 if you're curious. The CPI are gonna be very expensive.
Well, what I'm talking about is the
Change in
the
coverage.
liability for 2.5, the liability for 2.5.
Oh, yes, I can run you those.
The
And
liability for
sure,
250.
of course. So would you like to start as low as 205, maybe 210, 220, 225, 250, like that? Because we can run as many as you'd like, and we put them side by side in a PDF. You just can take a peek if you're curious. Sure, of course. Let me do, I'm gonna run you 205, 210, 220, 225, and 250, just to give you a base. And then, would you like to see any COLA costs, if you're curious? Or,
I'd like to see what it costs the county to do a partial launch.
sure, okay, I can do that. That's a very inexpensive increase. The only thing is, it's just non-rescindable, it's there forever, because we can't tell the members, oh, you can take out a lump sum, and then 1 year say, oh, we changed our mind, we took it away. So
But what's the downside of it being there forever? What does it matter to
There's-
us as an employer?
Not as nothing, you just can't change it. If you ever had a court member join your court and says, I don't like that, well, he just can't change it. That's really the only downside. And I will tell you, commissioners and judge, that we never let a member take a lump sum without showing them the before and after. We have to. So we say, okay, you can have your 50,000, but this is what your benefit happens after. And some say, I need it, and that's their money. And some say, never mind, it shrinks it too much. So, but we will always give them a side by side. We counsel them, and then they can decide.
So just to be clear, because that's a great question. That doesn't affect the county at all.
No,
It's just a
you
question.
just can't take it away. Yeah.
Okay.
No, doesn't really.
There's no cost to the county?
In the beginning, there's a small cost, and here's why. Because remember when I said we study your plan and we know everything about you all? Well, now we know that at any point in time, someone's gonna take some money out. And because we know that, you have to fund it accordingly to make sure. So it's a very inexpensive benefit increase. It's not like a COLA or a match increase, but there is a cost to it. So I'll run you all by itself what a partial lump sum cost would be. I can share that with you.
Is that retroactive to current retirees?
No, it's not retroactive.
Okay.
So they can't, since they're already getting their check, it has nothing to do with
Only
that.
applies to retirees also, correct?
Oh, no, it applies to people the day they retire. So only your active members would benefit from this. All of your retirees.
I know, but an active employee today can't make application for a partial withdrawal.
Oh,
They've
no.
been here 15 years,
Oh,
they're
no.
still gonna work a long time.
Oh,
They
no,
can't-
that's a great question. Only the day they're retired. In fact, it's on the retirement application. Do you want a lump sum? It's only on the retirement application.
Okay.
Because people will ask you, can we take out some money? No, they can't take out. No,
And we
only.
control the maximum percentage that they can take out.
So that's
Is it already
another
clear?
great question. It's from $1 to 100% of their own money, and they can
Oh,
retire off the
100%.
match. They can take out all their own money and retire off just the match.
And I did that myself. And the
Okay.
reason I did that was
Okay.
because I want to get as much of the retirement out of there as fast as I can. Because if I die, that money stops. So I invested all that money in other places
There you
where it
go.
doesn't die.
Same
Some
thing I
people
did
can do
at
that.
TMRS.
Yep.
It's a better investment because if you die, all your retirement is gone. So I don't want to have that.
And
So-
everyone still in the system appreciates you for leaving that behind.
Not me. 'cause
Not you,
I
but
clawed out as much as I possibly could.
So people could use it for that, sir. The day they retire, I'm gonna take out up to 100% of my own and then retire off the match, if that's a choice they make with partial lump sum. So it's really, and there's no right or wrong. Partial lump sum it's just, an option, but it's the philosophy of this court of what they choose and what they'd like to offer.
Also, survivor benefits, I'm not a fan of because it drops your pay. I take and buy life insurance that's guaranteed payout when I die. Because that survival benefit, if we die, then the county keeps all the money again. So I don't want them to keep anything.
That's true.
You're wearing the wrong hat
You-
today.
It's your money and you want it now.
Change hats, you forgot.
Well, you would be a fan, Commissioner, of the dual life. You'd be a fan of the dual life because the dual life pays you for your whole life and then it pays one other person for their whole life. And so it pays out 2 life expectancies. And I hear what you're saying. Those are more popular.
Life insurance, though, pays out better than that dual life.
I
That's
see.
why.
Gotcha.
Because if you drop $1 million into life insurance,
That's true.
you no matter what, somebody's getting $1 million.
Yes, you have that, you're right.
When you get to a certain point in life, that insurance gets expensive though. That's
As
the
long as you
only-
took it out early enough.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about making that decision at retirement.
But I
time.
compared it to the survivor benefit. The survivor benefit was gonna cost me like $525 a month, and the life insurance was only like $487, and it doubled my amount of retirement.
But see, if we had the power of Congress and could come up with a $3 trillion deal, we could fund all this and not have to worry about it. But
When,
You don't got a printing press in the
when the
basement?
actuaries are running the numbers,
Yes.
they're running it for the pool as a whole or for our individual county trust?
It depends on what they're looking at. For example's life expectancies, they're looking at the aggregate and they're using large numbers of people to determine what those might be. When they're valuing your plan and they're determining your cost, they're going off your numbers alone. How big are you? What are your salaries? Who's eligible? For example, Garza County Hospital District, I like to use them. They're right around the corner in Garza County. One employee. I mean, that budget is so different. So when they're valuing costs, they're only looking at you. But when they're valuing life expectancies and certain large projections, they're using the aggregate, the whole system.
we've had some inquiries over the last several years about doing some kind of a COLA for retirees, but golly, it's such a challenge just to keep the current payroll where you want it to be or like for it to be. It's
Yes.
pretty difficult to do.
I hear you, Commissioner. You know, and I will say this, I've been doing this for a while, and I tell members, and I'm very honest with them, I say, you know, even a 4-100, a 4% 100, and you all are 7-200. You're at 7% for the member, 200 match. Even at a 4-100, without a COLA, you get more of a retirement than most Americans.
Yeah.
So even at the lowest, so you have a 7-200, Commissioner, and even if you could never pass a COLA, you're giving them more than most of the people they know in their lifetime.
The last time I looked at it, and I hadn't really opened my account up, looked lately, I didn't think the survival, the survivor deal was that bad. It looked to be like a pretty decent deal, really.
So it's interesting, the word survivor benefit in our system, we actually refer it to something a little bit unique. So survivor benefit means that when you have a member with 4 or more years of service, and they should pass away unexpectedly, their beneficiary gets all their money and their interest and the match from Wichita. So let's say I worked for you for 5 years and I died. My spouse would get all my money, the interest I've earned, and Wichita County is going to match it. And now my spouse gets a check for the rest of his life. He's my survivor who gets the benefit. It's called survivor benefit. So the survivor benefit doesn't cost the member anything, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's just really a payout of what the member didn't get because unfortunately their life ended too soon. So that's what they get. But I hear what the commissioner's talking about. If you can buy a life
It all
insurance with
depends
a
on your
certain...
age though, because,
It-
well, when I retired, we were both young.
But when does the spouse
Still,
do that scenario,
still.
Erica? Because I didn't realize till a year or two ago that 4-year applies. So that employee is not vested.
No.
But that spouse can receive benefit. Does that spouse receive immediate benefit if they wanted to at 37 years of age? Or do they have to wait to a retirement age to draw that benefit?
In fact, not only do they receive it immediately, we're not allowed to hold on to it. We have to find that beneficiary immediately because we're not a bank, and so they get it immediately. So upon the passing of that member, their beneficiary is going to get that money with the match paid out immediately. It's called survivor benefit. And so if they don't have a beneficiary on file, it defaults to their estate, and then whoever is named in a probate court, their beneficiary, but it's paid out immediately. We're not even allowed to hold on to it. And we actually have members call and say, can you just hold it until, just hold it for 10 years? Well, we can't because we're not a bank. So if you name a minor, you must give us a custodian because we have to pay the custodian until the minor turns 18.
And so for how long, is there a cap to that length of time they're paid?
It's their lifetime.
You're just doing the actuarial table on 60
Life
years
expectancy,
of-
yes,
instead
yes.
of 30.
And thankfully, that doesn't happen often. We don't lose people as often as, that I speak a bit, not to be cavalier, but matter of factly, did we see deaths increase during COVID? Absolutely. And in fact, one of the reasons why costs went down are not just salaries. It's because people passed away sooner than we thought because of COVID. So there have been more deaths in the last 3 or 4 years, but in general, survivor benefit isn't paid out very often, statistically. But it is there for their life. And just like the judge said, we look at that for a life expectancy of that scenario, using an aggregate model of 400,000 people that we study. Mhm.
When I first came on this court, I didn't really think much about the retirement deal, and I think a lot of people are in that shape. But you know, after a while, it begins to look pretty good. It's a
Especially
very good benefit.
when you stay here and you have time on your side, this benefit is for the career employee. If you have a career here, you're going to get a nice, because it's for life and it's dependable. And we, we're very proud to serve Texans. Other entities like teachers, as they should get a retirement, and state they should, and so should county and district. And we're very honored that 56 years ago they created us by the legislature. They just don't fund us. We fund ourselves, and that's quite all right. We'll fund ourselves.
Only problem I found with that ability to draw more in retirement than you made when you're working is when you've got somebody that works for you and you're trying to talk them out of retirement, you lose your argument. You're not in a very good negotiating position.
No, you're not. You're not a good negotiating position.
And
It's fine.
Erica, so that I'm clear, when the county pays their liability rate that you've set here for us today, we have the option 12.11.
Yes, you do.
But when we pay that $2 and the interest, so all the $2 on, or all the 12.1% that is being paid off of payroll today equates to the annual amount needed to suffice our $2.
Yes, and oftentimes people say, Erica, last time I checked, 7 times 2 is 14. Why don't we pay you 14? Because we don't calculate your benefit that way. We look at who withdrew their money and assets left in the fund. We look at all kinds of factors. The actuaries in their valuation determine our gains when we pass off gains. And so when they finish their math, they determine that 7 times 2 being 14, that's not how we do it. That 12.11 will suffice for that 2 to 1. Absolutely. And they do it every year.
But so the interest off of these $2, so that I've got, let's say, always 350 employees into play, and
Okay.
the $2 every year that I'm putting back for them of that match, or the 2-time match that I'm putting back for them, draws interest. It benefits me, that interest, the next year as a county employer?
Yes, absolutely, because if you see your assets at the bottom of this plan assessment, your assets being 135 million, when we do well and we pass off those gains, you won't see it till the next year when possibly, Commissioner, your costs are going to go down again. Like what happened? Well, you had a negative year and our costs went down. Well, you increased your payroll, and then the 22% is still in the pipeline, so you're still getting some gains from that. And so yes, you won't see the benefit to assets earned or any kind of interest earned on your assets until the next valuation cycle for the next year. Which is why we operate in arrears. We study you as of the end of 2022. I speak to you in 2023, and it affects 2024. So we operate in arrears because we have to go off that data. So that's why, to your point, you're not going to see it until next time.
Right.
So if we have a good year this year, hopefully, you won't see it until 2025.
Right.
And we budget for the full 14% just to be on the safe side. In case this.
You are smart to do that.
So
Yes.
can we tell
You're
people that
smart.
Erica Dwyer said that 7 times 2 equals 12.1?
Yeah.
Is that common for math?
She's a very smart girl, and she says that 7 times 2 is 12.11. She says it.
So, so I understand too, Erica, the funded ratio today is 88.3. But
Yes.
let's say that we magically could pay you and be 100% funded.
You can
If we
do-
were, what would my rate be today?
I can show you. That's a great question. Let's say you wrote us a check for $17,896,581. You funded the unfunded amount. Your rate, do you see where it says employer paid normal cost? 6.55. You would only, that 17 million is reflected in your unfunded at 5.56. So you would pay that 5.56 off, you would only owe a 6.55. So you go from budgeting 14% to budgeting maybe 6%.
But
If
when
you
does
could
that?
And no,
when
we
does-
can't use ARPA funds.
And when does that, but that 6.55 would continue to go increase on me again, would it?
It could
Even-
creep up if you passed a COLA or if we had a negative year. It could creep up a little bit, but when you fund it that much, that unfunded amount, it's funded for some time. I won't promise that you'll always be 100% funded because you have a normal plan. You're about to hire new people who you've never paid for, or maybe we have a negative year. So I always tell my courts, imagine a small wave. You can pay all that off and you can drop. Now you're here, but you still have to imagine a small wave. This is a live plan that's always evolving. And so you might pay off the 17 million and then 2 years, why do we owe them 400,000? Well, because you hired a bunch of new employees and you haven't paid for them yet, so it's going to wiggle a little bit. But I will tell you this, one of the best parts of my job is that this page right here, just by paying this responsible funding, just by paying your 12.11, you don't have to pay us the 17 million. You don't have to fund the 6.55. You're responsibly funded just by paying what's due. If this court did come across a lot of money and you wanted to pay it, you certainly could, but you don't have to. You don't have
But
to.
heavy turnover
Or we could leave
would
it in
not
our
be
bank
good
and
for
draw
that
interest that we could
situation, would
use.
it?
Say that again, sir.
If you had heavy turnover.
Oh, yes, if you had heavy
that'd
turnover.
get you.
Like a small district,
Yeah.
they like to stay funded because they're a little district and they have heavy
Yeah.
turnover. Yes, but counties you're not anticipating of closing your doors tomorrow. You're an ongoing entity. So just by paying what's due, you're responsibly funded. But because of the financial world, they make us use the word unfunded. And our executive director, our head actuary, and our chief investment officer will say that word unfunded is a misnomer. You're not unfunded. You're responsibly funded. We're charging you accurately every year, and you're paying it. And some of you pay more than what's due. So you're really responsibly funded. And so, I'm glad you asked. If you were to pay that off, that 6.55 would go away. And it might be gone for a few years until the plan kind of got a little momentum.
Jeff, do you want to do that Monday?
Do what?
$17 million.
Well, I was just doing so, what is that? I can't see it in my mind.
It's 17 cents, what it is.
So let's say if we took $17 million this year and invested it at 5%, what would we hope to make? I mean, that is the
Under our
question, is it
current
not?
investment program.
Because here's what I see.
Yeah.
If you take $17 million and you can earn, let's say, $800,000-900,000 interest on this year, but my unfunded is costing me, my payroll is costing me $4 million because of the unfunded. If I cut that in half, I just took 17 million and started earning $2 million with it instead
Yes.
of less than $1 million.
Yes, based on what you're paying annually versus what you could, and you're earning elsewhere, what's the greater of the two?
That's why I said Monday.
Well, I
But,
mean,
You're making the auditor very nervous.
We haven't budgeted for it, so we can't spend it.
She's kind of turned pale.
I'm sorry.
She's gasping for breath.
It's just a thought.
It's a
good thought. And I know that the appraisal district, and I didn't know why, we've had several speak to us, but they are adamant about keeping their liability 100% funded.
I can
And-
tell you why. There is a belief among some appraisal districts that they're going to be assumed or closed or one day not exist.
I wish that we could do away with property taxes. So I'm aiming for that.
So if they have that philosophy, perhaps, if they're funded, they don't worry. Whereas an ongoing entity like a county that isn't as worried about being assumed or being taken into account, you can pay what is owed over time. But I've observed that in my travels, that appraisal districts are particularly adamant about staying 100% funded because, and I have asked chief appraisers and they've said, we don't know, Erica, if we will be here after the next session.
And if anybody ever came up with a really good idea, that could very well happen, I would think. I just,
So they're particular. And then I have some emergency services districts that are always worried about being eaten up by a hospital, and so they want to stay 100% funded. So it's really just the position of the entity, but the fortune is that in our system, guess what? Everybody manages themselves. And if that makes you happy, so be it. You are in charge of your own trust and your own plan. So that's,
what our average turnover is, do you know?
I don't.
I just never thought of it until we just.
I bet you it's
discussed it.
20.
We know the jail deal.
Yeah, it
makes
depends
it
on the
happen,
department,
yeah.
yeah. We have some departments have.
I just never thought about
We
it
have
until we.
one
looked at it
department
way.
that has tons of turnover.
It does, it depends, it's departmental. Mhm.
And Erica, on that appraisal district deal, so if a entity,
Mhm.
let's say, and it doesn't have to be the appraisal district, it could be the water district.
Sure.
If they're only 80% funded and the entity ceases,
Yes.
are they only paying 80% of?
No. With their board has to come up with the difference owed, or worst case scenario, their members don't get the benefit they were promised. Because we don't have very many terminations. I've been there 11 years and I've worked on 2 because people don't leave our system. But I've watched 2 emergency services districts get taken up by a hospital.
Yeah.
So they in effect terminate. And what happens is at that moment when you are assumed and you no longer exist, all of your employees immediately become eligible and they have to be paid out. And so what we do is we do a termination study. It takes about 4 weeks, and then we meet with their executive directors and we meet with their board and we show them in the study, this is what you owe, that because you weren't 100% funded, this is the difference. In the 2 cases I've witnessed, they just paid it. They had the money and they paid it and everybody got their money, and those people began getting a lifetime check and we administer it because they don't exist anymore. So TCDRS becomes the administrator and we will pay those people for the rest of their life. But they're so few and far between. Terminations are so few and far between, but they happen. And so for appraisal districts, I don't know, they worry and they just want to be 100%. But not all of them are, but they try. They
Well,
try.
if it was a buyout situation, you'd want to negotiate that as part of the deal, but I guess when somebody gets gobbled up, it's not always a buyout.
It's not always a buyout.
Yeah.
But people, because we value their plan, and most of my job is spent on the road talking about costs, a lot of them take advantage of the elected rate, or the other strategy is to make a lump sum payment. If they have extra money, they make a lump sum payment, and it helps them stay really high funded. So they say, you know what, if we close our doors, at least we're 95% funded, and that difference is very little.
Let's just say, for example, that a person with an 80% funded liability the entity was to close. If that employee immediately left employment and came to, let's say, Wichita County,
Sure.
could their benefit continue on and they'd be consumed, both being TCDRS and
No, because
participant?
they weren't part of your plan, and we don't let money be rolled in. So that person would affect Wichita in a negative way by allowing us to roll money in that you all didn't budget for. And we can't combine plans. Now, they don't lose their time. So to your point, Commissioner, a lot of people go find jobs with counties and districts because they say, well, we're gonna find another TCDRS plan to work for, but they don't get to combine it. That has to be handled separately. They get their payout. We deal with their executives, it's all handled, and then they get to start with you with a lot of time, but the money is separate. And again, terminations are very rare. In fact, they're so rare, I have to follow a handbook because we don't use them. But the study is very detailed, and we just show them what it would cost them, and sometimes appraisal districts, they're not planning on leaving, but they ask for a study because they're curious what would be owed if our doors closed after next session. And they'll ask us for one. We'll provide it just for information purposes. We provide them. But that's how they work, and I've witnessed 2 because a hospital came and absorbed an emergency services. They took their ambulances and they just bought them, so they closed their doors.
Erica, how long did you say you've been TCDRS?
So for 2 years I was with the member services, and for 9 years I've been with employer services. So September 10th will be 11 years.
Okay, so you were not here in 08? You were
No,
not-
no, sir. I started in 12.
Okay, I was just wondering, worst case scenario is that 2008 number of 29% below. If there had ever been a time where the rate that the county was supposed to pay was above 14%.
I can show you.
It was a very bad year for the county overall. Besides that, we had the 2008 sheriff's referendum that put up $1 million on the books that we owed their employees that we were unbudgeted for.
Yeah.
And did not have the savings for it.
That
So
when we did
so the county went 3 years without any pay raises to all of their employees to recoup that cost.
that when we bought out the vacation
Then we did that some years later, but.
Yeah.
No, that was before, they did
Yeah.
that was a
2008.
voter.
The reason I ask is we always budget 14% to make sure we're safe, and I just wondered,
Has it ever
looking at that
exceeded?
trend, if we ever.
So
And it used to be 150 before we went to 200.
Absolutely,
We used
she's
to be
right.
1.5.
Absolutely. So we used to be a fixed rate plan. Everybody in TCDRS used to pay 7%. And that stopped working because plans got more expensive and counties grew. Well, when we started in 1968, counties were tiny. Well, now counties have quadrupled in size. So we had to change that. In 1998, we went from a fixed rate plan to a variable rate plan. So your rate changed for the first time, commissioners, to 7.53. You'll see that, Judge, right here on this page. Look at how your rate went into the 8s, the 10s, and the 11s, and it's exactly what she just said. In 2002, you went from a 160 to a 175 match, and you went past and future. So that means you all went all the way back to the beginning, and you made their match 175. And then in 2008, you went to a 200% match all the way back to the beginning, past and future. And then and it's been 200 since 2008. So the reason your rate went from the 8s to the 11s and 12s, and why it's kind of remained right here in the 12s, is because when you went to a match increase, just like she said, from 150 to 200, you guys went all the way back. It took a while to pay those off. And in paying them, your rate creeped up just a little bit over time. So to answer your question, it's never been above 14. If I look at this page, the highest your rate has ever been is 13.91 in 2 years ago. It's the highest it's ever been. Is that why you started budgeting 14%? Because it hit 13.91? Okay. Yeah, that's the highest it's ever been.
It was just the smartest fiscal thing to do.
Well, I guess similar to Social Security, you don't wanna get to the point where you're top heavy,
Yes.
where you've got this many people drawing and this many people paying in.
That's right.
That can be a devastating deal.
That's right. And to your point of the conversation moments ago, even though it's just for information, how do you lower that cost? How do you get away from the 14 and lower it again? You pay down some of these liabilities by making a lump sum payment of any size, or you pay an elected rate, and elected rates kick in real nicely at about year 3. After about 3 years, that's when Tarrant County started going shoom, shoom, and they noticed that. You gotta let that elected rate work for you. It's not gonna do much in the first 3 years, but then all of a sudden, your cushion starts building. So if you wanna steer away from the 14, make a little lump sum payment or pay a little more, and you'll come back down. Because you guys have been paying off those match increases for some time, so those are gonna get paid off any
But
time.
Cheryl, we're only budgeting 14, we're not paying.
That is correct.
That
At
is
this
correct.
time, we're budgeting for it, but we're not paying that.
Which is the one, in 22 and 21, the total contribution rate was above 14, so.
Mhm.
That keeps us pretty level there at that 14, so we know what we're expecting to possibly be paying out, yes.
Well, we learned when we did the jail bond deal, because we were able to get our bonds sold a little early and had some interest income. We got looking at the income, and even at a very low interest rate at that period of time, I told Bob Hampton, I says, there's your retirement program, get you 70 million and you can get along pretty good. You can live off the interest then.
And you'll notice, Judge, that 12, that's the silent elected rate that's just sitting there real quiet because it was never adjusted, but your required exceeded it, and by state statute, you must pay what's required. I can remove it if you ever tell me take it off. I don't like it on there. I can take it off, but it was never removed, so it just quietly sits there, the 12%. And the reason I leave it is because when courts say, when did we pay you that 12? I like to show them, well, you paid it back here, and it's just helpful for information.
Is there a funded ratio that y'all are trying to peg? Because I see we got down into the mid-70s at some point, about a decade and a half ago. And I'm guessing do y'all have a number that you're trying to bring the...
So as a system, we love to be above 88, and we're 89. We just hit 90, and then now we're back at 89. So as a system, we like the high 80s. To answer your question, we do not have a ratio for counties and districts, but we say this. Outside rating agencies like Fitch and S&P have nothing to do with us. They just judge everybody on standards. They say that a pension system is healthy if they're 80% funded and higher. So we tell the counties and districts, stay above 80. Stay above 80. They call you healthy, then that's great. But we don't have a particular, because when you're a new district, you're in the 60s and 70s for a good 5-6 years. And then you kind of hit 80 and then you go from there. So 80 and above is higher. Mm-hmm.
Now, Erica, not long ago, maybe Tommy and Kathy had you come for a program. Did you come up here?
I
and
think
talk?
my colleague Lisa might have come. Did she come and she counseled the members? Yes. Would you like that to happen again?
Well, I think it's a good thing, don't you, to let people, because we didn't have a chance to ask, but I've always wondered, just listen to Willie talk about his options as he retired and what,
We used to
that's a
have
part you don't
company
ever really hear.
We probably had 20 people show up, and I was really disappointed, but recently when they did their webinar on paperless, we found a new button, and I showed it to Mark, where we showed how many employees have not activated their account and have not chosen a beneficiary, and you'd be surprised, some of the long-standing people in the county that,
Well, yeah, and if they're not, I mean, a lot of times they don't update their paperwork, and so when you don't update your beneficiary, it could be an ex-boyfriend, girlfriend,
And-
spouse, and that's who's
no.
getting it, no matter what
You're
your will
retired,
says.
You're done.
They go off of that
It-
paperwork.
it Go to that person, and we've had a lot that, that's my ex-wife, she's not
Yes.
getting, or
They-
whatever.
Yes.
And
Or they think they're gonna be with Tommy Joe forever, and
I've called some, they just won't come in. We started with maintenance and housekeeping because they seem to be the least adept on their phones. And, I know Sonya's got most of those guys entered, they didn't know, they had, and some have been here for a long time.
What would prevent us from doing a health and benefits fair, like right before open enrollments, we could have people here to help people check their beneficiary, to get them enrolled. Like, we used to do that at the city.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we can try it. It's really just lack of participation.
And it's
But
not
if we
hard.
made it a little bit bigger than just
Mhm.
sending out an email, if we had several, all of our
I
different
mean,
agencies.
we have a hard
here,
enough time getting people to do open
I
enrollment.
know.
Yeah.
It's at least worth exploring. Invite some community partners, like the city did, like United Regional, et cetera, where we get.
You wanna do it all the time, you're doing your little health deal and
I will
have
tell you,
some
when we
breakfast pizza.
enroll, when they enroll, they need to be on their personal device, and it won't be like a group, everybody's gonna do it individually, and so.
No, it's just to have someone there to help them,
We've got like
help them do that, because I know
Not.
road and bridge guys,
Mhm.
maintenance guys.
Well, we have included a paper on TCDRS in there when we do their benefits.
Their orientation.
I know that there's a lot of people who've been here a long time and are not signed up.
Yeah.
Just, to me, it'd be helpful. We can talk about it.
And however we can be supportive, you let us know. If we can send people down and maybe even we break up and go in the early morning to the, meet with Road and Bridge because their days start early. Maybe we come to them and make it a little bit convenient. We can design something. You just let us know and we can work together. I took some notes to follow up with you on
But
that.
when there is a beneficiary, because this surprised me, because when I did go online, now it's been quite some time since I looked, at least 2 years.
Okay.
But it informed me I didn't have a beneficiary.
Mm.
But how could I have signed up without a beneficiary? And it would have always been my spouse.
So when you register, before we went paperless, you would fill out a form, and they would enter you in the system, and then you had to fax in a separate form for beneficiary. We've changed that now. Now it's an online enrollment that they just enter it online, but the member still has to go in and either enter their beneficiary, or perhaps the employer can sit there and ask them who it is and now enter it. Because by state law, I don't even know what it's called, but we can't force anybody to name somebody. They have to, on their own, choose to name somebody, and they can leave it blank, which we actually say is better. If you don't know who to put, leave it blank, because if you're married, it defaults to your spouse like that, because we're a community property state. And if you don't have a spouse, it defaults to your probate, and then your will can decide. But to the example she gave, it is one of TCDRS's biggest headaches and worst nightmares when a wife of 30 years gets told that the girlfriend, when he was 18 as a road and bridge hire, is getting everything. And there's nothing we can do. And it happens. And they think that they update it because they changed their insurance, but we're not insurance. And so to her point, she's stellar in what she just said. Don't name anybody, because at least if you're married now, it goes to the wife. But we've had to, it's horrible. It's horrible. We have to tell them.
They come in and they don't have their beneficiaries, date of birth, social security, especially if they're doing their kids, I don't know, and then they wanna wait, and then they don't cut back,
Right.
and so then it doesn't get changed.
So yes, you can enroll without having a beneficiary.
Mhm.
And if you never update your beneficiary, but she's correct, legal standards, it's better to not have one
Leave it blank.
listed and have it blank.
Than to have
because
an
we are
old.
community property.
Or an ex-spouse, they thought they'd change and they have a new spouse and it gets very ugly and we can't change anything.
Right.
So I'm
And,
gonna take-
and the judge has no jurisdiction in probate to override that. This does not go to probate unless there's no beneficiary named.
Correct.
And no spouse.
And then it defaults to a will. Mhm.
That's right.
So the takeaways from today are leave your beneficiary blank and 7 times 2. Erica, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me and for welcoming me. If you ever have questions, I will follow up with you on costs, employer match, on COLAs, and on partial lump sum. Thank you.
Great.
Good job, Erica.
Thank you well, thank you for
Thank
having me. I love coming to Wichita County. You have really good food here too. It's a great place to come.
Yes, we do.
I love it.
It is 2:44 and court is adjourned.
All right.